Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of Kyuranger episode 6. So this episode actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but yet the parts I thought were going to be bad were bad, if that makes any sense. It was like basically the debut episode for the little Pegasus armor that goes along with the Kyutama, as it has a different ability than the other ones we've seen so far, which just kind of grant a power of some sort. And also was the episode, or the plot's episode, that was all twisted up. The episode's plot also revolved around the Kyurangers sort of figuring out who their leader is. So, what I mean when I said at the beginning about the parts being bad that I thought they were, which was the dancing parts. Like when I saw the preview for last week, or from last week, excuse me, I kind of assumed I wasn't going to like this episode much because it was probably going to be some over-the-top, stupid dance bits. And I was right about that. In terms of, like, I really didn't like anything that had to do with the dancing part of the episode. I thought it was stupid and annoying. It was that type of humor that just doesn't really connect with me. Like, most of Toku's humor is kind of like just Victor and Monty's humor for me, but just all the time. So, like, it just doesn't connect with me. I think it's over the top, and it kind of just undercuts a lot of the show for me. But, that being said, excuse me, sorry. There was actually quite a few beats in this episode that I liked. No pun intended, I guess, maybe. But like, mainly amongst the sort of figuring out who the leader was, there was some kind of nice moments for Hammy in there, sort of her describing why she wants to be leader, which led to her sort of venting. Wow, I can really talk in this one, guys. Venting her frustrations about why Lucky would be leader, because she basically was frustrated that like he just gets everything by luck while she works hard. And then Commander was like, oh no, it's actually just because he's a positive thinker, and that positive energy sort of, you know, draws good outcomes towards him because he's always positive thinking, which was actually kind of a nice moment, I thought. I don't know if that's necessarily always true, but it was just kind of a nice actual character moment, both for Hammy and then both for Commander, sort of describing Lucky's methods in a more... Lucky obviously didn't describe it himself that way, and for all we know later we'll find out he does have some sort of power, but that's connected to the Kyutama or something. But it was just kind of a nice, for lack of a better word, grounded moment to the whole Lucky thing. So that was kind of nice. Although, like, honestly, I think the reason, I mentioned this on Twitter, but I think the reason he comes off as Lucky is because the dude, like, literally says everything he does is lucky. Like, it's not like, oh man, I threw this in a trash can and it landed, or, oh, I stopped myself from tripping, that's lucky. Like, he'll be eating lunch and he'll take a bite of a sandwich and he'll be like, talk about lucky! I'm eating a sandwich! I'm like, that's not lucky, you're just eating a sandwich. It reminded me the way the ninjas always called everything they did like a technique. They'd be like, getting up from the chair technique. I'm like, no, it's not a technique. Just because you're ninjas, everything isn't a technique. So I think that's kind of weird and funny. But, yeah, so the reason I forgot to mention that he was selected as leader was at the beginning of the episode they were like, oh, whoever performs best in this mission becomes leader, and it was Lucky at the end. I feel like it would have been funny if, mainly because Commander's kind of had this bit where, for a couple episodes where it's like, oh, Commander was trying to teach us this lesson, and he was like, oh, of course, but he really wasn't. So I was like half expecting it to be a sort of joke at the end where they're like, oh, Commander knew all along that they would learn this outcome on their own, and I thought it was going to be like jokingly revealed that he basically picked Lucky and knew all along it had to be Lucky because he has to go on every mission as leader because his mech is like the center of all the combinations, but I'm kind of surprised that didn't come up. Maybe they'll have it come up later. And also, like, the whole who's leader plot kind of reminded me of an episode they did in Go Sager, which was kind of the same plot in terms of like, oh, we need to figure out who our leader is. But it was much later in the series, if I remember right. And it basically, again, if I remember right, had sort of the same result in a lot of areas in terms of like, the basic setup was that they functioned fine until someone brought up, hey, who's our leader? And then everything started to get messy until they realized what they were doing was fine, because that was sort of the end result here too, is that they seem to function pretty decently together in the short time we've seen them. And then as soon as they mentioned the whole contest for the leader bit, they started to squabble and battle over trying to prove themselves, and it caused them to not function as well. And then at the end, even though like Lucky had been chosen, and Hammy's like, alright, fine, you can be leader, I approve or whatever. And he was like, oh no, we don't really need a leader. It came off more of as like a joke-ish at the end, I guess, but it just kind of reminded me of that. But like the main bit of this episode, other than that, was the introduction of the Pegasus Armor, which I'm like torn on it in multiple ways because like I liked it okay when I saw the first pictures, but seeing it in person, I do kind of dig it. I kind of like the look of it. I think it looks well with the suit. Looks good with the suit. Goes well with the suit. That's what I was going with. Although that being said, side note, when they zoomed in on it a couple times, you could tell how cheap the prop was. Like, especially like on the Galaxy design, on like the wings and stuff, there were like deep scratches in it, like it was made of cheap foam. And I think like in the last scene, it almost looked like the nose, like part of the design was gonna come off. I'm like, can you really just tell the budget this season, like that Sentai's not doing so well? It was like with the really bad CGI and the how badly the prop looked. So that was kind of a thing I noticed. But outside of like looking at the prop looking like it's falling apart, I do like the look of it. I kind of liked the concept behind it of, I didn't know that it was going to have a sentient personality in it. I don't remember, or know, I guess, if it was in the information we got from the scans when we first saw it, because I just look at the pretty pictures and never read anything. But I thought that was kind of neat. I kind of liked the little Pegasus personality in there. I thought it kind of added this interesting little dynamic. Unfortunately, I wasn't a fan of like the dancing part of it. I thought it was really stupid and over the top. I think that they somehow could have achieved Pegasus sort of just having this unique way of adding to the fight with jumping around, and Lucky trying to have to work to master it / work with him without having the dancing. Because like him working on the dancing was sort of reinforced in the lesson with Hammy about like, you know, he's positive thinking, so like you guys gave up on the option of this dance training, but he hasn't. I think that still could have been worked out in a way that wasn't about the dancing, and then there was a really weird dance fighting. Again, like, it just kind of undercut the nice moments, and it was silly, and I didn't like it. So I didn't like the dancing part of the Pegasus stuff, but I liked everything else. Like, I liked the armor, I liked it having its own little personality. I thought it was pretty funny when Commander talked about, like, oh yeah, I found him when we ventured around, and he, like, had a little storybook. And then Naga, like, commented to the audience, like, multiple times. His character's so weird. Like, the first episode, it was, like, basically he was a Vulcan who had a hard time understanding emotions and was just copying other people. And now he hasn't really done much since his debut, and all he really does is make weird facial expressions in the background and, like, talk to the fourth wall or look at it, which is weird. So I'm interested to see what happens when a light is shined on him, even a little bit, sometime in the next few weeks. One other bit I just wanted to touch on that was kind of interesting was Stinger when he was on the ground. It was kind of interesting to see him. It's not something like I didn't know, but like it was just an interesting part of that dynamic of the dark matter already being invaded and, like, you know, occupying the planet, of just him passing by these two generals on the street and they're like just asking about the Kyurangers. It was just an interesting dynamic because usually, you know, you just have Earth is normal society, like now, I don't know, like this, like as if Earth society is right here in my living room, but you know what I mean. And then a monster comes down, the Rangers destroy it. But like in this case, you know, the dark matter is like a part of the society since they're ruling over it, which we got to see a little bit in the few episodes since we've arrived on Earth. But I just thought it was kind of neat and interesting to have the generals walking down the street and just sort of seeing that normalcy of it. And then him luring them away and sort of discovering that they're stronger than he thought, I thought was interesting. And like they actually had some pretty interesting designs. The weird whitish looking one with the weird face kind of was interesting. But I don't know, it wasn't anything huge. I just kind of appreciated the difference in that dynamic. I like how I was like, oh, have you seen the Kyurangers? And like, I like how inconspicuous he is with the giant morpher sticking out. And he's got like his bright orange coat underneath his like poncho or whatever. But anyway, overall, I thought this was a pretty average to decent episode. Again, I just wasn't a fan of the dancing bits. The over-the-top stuff sort of dragged it down for me, but it actually had a few nicer moments than I thought it would. So overall, I'll probably give it a 6.7. But anyway, that's about it. Until next time, make it the Threes Podcast at WritersRangeRumbles.com. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, Dawson Ryder, signing out.